Welcome to the Kickstart podcast. My name is Preston, and on this episode, we have the pleasure of hosting someone who has done an incredible job navigating her career, working at some pretty epic companies, to now becoming a founder at her own fast-growing recruiting agency that's absolutely crushing it in the technical space. Really happy to have you on the show, Tatiana. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Preston.
So to get started, for those that are unfamiliar with you and your background, would you just mind sharing just a very brief high-level summary of what you've done so far?
Okay. My career has not been a straight line path, so it's a little bit hard to keep brief, but I got my degrees in math and astrophysics, decided I didn't want to get a PhD, was like, what do I do now? But I learned to program along the way, so I went and worked at Microsoft. Was on the tablet PC team from 2001 to 2004, writing C# test code. Who wanted to be in Windows in 2004, though, when they tried to move us? And so I just decided I would join the college recruiting team for a little while I kind of unburnt out from that experience. And I found my thing. So I've been in recruiting ever since. So I did college recruiting at Microsoft for 2 years, left and got my MBA, moved to New York. And then I was about employee number 50 at AppNexus. I was their first tech recruiter. And then I moved to Etsy, where I was about employee 200 as a tech recruiter there. And then my last in-house role, I was an HR director at a little 50-person company called Aha Life. But they had some layoffs, and as the HR director, I had to conduct those, and that wasn't fun. And then I got laid off. And so I just thought, okay, I'm just going to freelance for a while. I'm not ready to go take something else. And now it's been 9 years. And so that I'm going to freelance for a little while turned into now having about 40 employees and working with some amazing, mostly New York companies.
Wow. Super speechless and jaw-dropping to hear that. So a lot to unpack there. And a lot of this is me hearing it for the first time. So you went to, just to kind of backtrack a little bit. So you went to university for, you said math and physics?
Math and astrophysics.
Math and astro, like why? Like, is that something you wanted to do? Did you have a family member?
I wanted to study black holes. That's why.
I mean, you had family members, your parents, were they into astrophysics at all? Like how does someone wake up one day and say they want to study
Stephen Hawking's and stuff. I was inspired, remember all those Voyager photos that would come back in the 80s? Oh, now they just got to Jupiter. Oh, now they just got to Saturn. That was my childhood. That stuff was exciting. I wanted to be a part of it.
Wow. So what are your thoughts of now seeing the recent photographs of the universe that just got live, I think, last week? I mean,
it's insane how densely packed the universe is. I mean, that was just like a very, very small section of sky. I don't want to get too deep here, but I feel like the main feeling that comes, when you see something like that is it's impossible for us to be alone. I mean, that there is so much out there in space. It would be crazy if we're the only living organism. So I look forward to the next couple decades of discoveries out there.
It was certainly a goosebump moment for myself, just seeing those pictures. I know we're not here to talk about astrophysics and stars, but seeing the pictures, Tatiana, it just makes you think how small we actually are.
Absolutely.
In the universe. And then just going a step beyond that, all the little things that we go through in our day-to-day lives that annoy you, that frustrate you, it should be completely meaningless, right? Just understanding that we're just playing a small part in the massive universe out there.
Absolutely.
But I'm very much looking forward to seeing additional pictures. So you went to school for math and astrophysics, and then from there, it's not like you got a job in math or astrophysics. You then went into the software world and learned how to code. Talk to me about that. What was your thought process? Why coding?
Well, I had learned to code for astrophysics. So we actually had to study astro data. We use mostly a language called IDL, but also I learned C programming. And that was because I wanted to do a research internship in Antarctica, working with photomultiplier tubes in the Antarctic ice, and they programmed in C. And so I had taken C, and then my advisor said, oh, you should take Java too. And so I did have some programming experience. And working on tablet PC, there was a lot of matrix algebra involved because you're transforming the ink. So it actually kind of combined a little bit of my math algebra background too.
So after you graduated, were you strictly applying for engineering jobs? It just kind of was a natural progression of what you studied to the professional world?
I also applied for some trader jobs. Believe it or not, I had a job offer from Enron. I
Oh my
interviewed with them
God.
in April of 2001. I would have been starting there in July of 2001. And then you know that they erupted all over the news around September 2001. And it was like, okay, I dodged that bullet.
Why didn't you take it?
Because I had the job offer from Microsoft. I actually almost took the Enron offer, but to work on an emerging technology like tablet PC, I mean,
Mm,
back then we had the promise of being like the iPad or something. We didn't know that, that Apple was developing a rival product. And I think we had a lot of hubris. I mean, we laughed about what a failure their Lisa was and everything. We didn't think there was any way they could surpass Microsoft in this.
mhm.
So at the time it seemed like I was working on, like one of the most cutting edge pieces of technology then, and I just couldn't pass that up.
Yeah, Enron just wasn't as cool enough to sway you to work for them. Okay, so you had the opportunity to work at Microsoft back in the heyday. It was the place to be, working on cutting edge technology. So you joined there as a technical coder. And then at what point or how long were you coding until you're like, you know what? Oh, wow, recruiting. That's cool. Like, when did that happen?
Well, so I was good friends with the recruiter that hired me into
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft. Like we really bonded over the whole experience. And then being like a young female developer working on this very sexy product,
Mm-hmm.
I got to go on a lot of recruiting trips and I liked it. And so when we got moved into Windows and they were going to have us rewrite all the code and everything, I just felt like, what do I think would be fun to do for a few years? I never meant to make recruiting a profession. I mean, I'm sure I could interview you for an hour about how you fell into recruiting, but I would bet money that it wasn't that you were like, 5 years old playing with some ATS software saying, I'm going to be a recruiter when I grow up, right? Like we all got into it some random way. It just turned out to be my thing, like you
Mm.
start doing it and you're like, I like this. Like, I actually consider myself an introvert. And I think part of my introversion is that I enjoy people watching. I
Mm.
am the kind of person like if you drag me to the mall rather than shopping, I'd rather just sit on the bench and like make up stories about what these two people might be like and what they do and what they're shopping for. And I feel like that is parallel to what we do as recruiters. It's like a very deep listening, trying to understand what is going to make this person happy, what makes them tick, what do they like doing day to day, what do they not like doing, and then you're listening, you're matchmaking, you're listening to these companies, what opportunities do they have. And for me, I find that very satisfying. As recruiters, we're not curing cancer or anything, but I think like finding a job is something that it makes people, it's a good in the world. And so I enjoy that, the matchmaking bit of it, and just that, yeah, there's a net positive from what we do.
How fulfilled were you working as a coder? I'm sure that kind of tapped into some different parts of you. Were like, oh, this is like challenging. It's analytical, quantitative. Or when you discovered a brand new profession like recruiting, and the deeper you dug in, you're like, wow, this is actually more me, or this leverages more of my skill set and tools.
I mean, I think if life had gone differently, I might
Mm-hmm.
still be writing code.
Mm.
I didn't hate it. And I was writing test code. And I mean, I even remember like one of the coolest bugs I found is like if you rotate something like 360 million degrees, let's say, it should be like rotating 360, right? Like the thing shouldn't move. It's just a multiple of that. But
Right.
it did move. And we found out it was because of a rounding error in the matrix math. Like there's a matrix to transform the ink that has like some sines and cosines and stuff in there, and that creates some long decimals that were getting rounded. And so you actually want to take the calculation mod 360 first and then round it. And
Mm.
I don't know, just things like that to me were so beautiful. Like that is the kind of reason that I wanted to study things like math. And so I enjoyed their application in the real world. And yeah, I think it's that software. I mean, it's amazing because I think it's this tool that creates leverage. I think that if you look at human inventions, like the pace of technology is just increasing, right? I mean, like I don't know how long there was between like the invention of the wheel and the invention of the cart or whatever, but I feel like those periods are getting shorter and shorter. And I feel like, I mean, even now people can code without knowing how to code, right? All the no code sites and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing that anybody almost can create a website for very little money. And so I just feel like it's this great equalizer. So I think software is very exciting and I want to be a part of software. Now I'm not a part of writing it, but I think being a part of finding the right people to build these products is still like a great way to be involved with it. And
Mhm.
I love what I do working in an agency because I feel like we get the real 30,000-foot view. I get to see what is going on in technology across all sorts of different disciplines. And I love that.
Yeah, a lot of the different things that you said really resonated with me. I mean, going back to just how you got started, I didn't even know the recruiting industry existed, and I think that's the same or
There
very
you
similar
go.
story that a lot of recruiters today have.
Hmm.
And it's I remember one time just looking up the recruiting industry. It's massive. It's $1 billion industry, growing year after year, around since the 40s. So this is like one of those. It's like a real estate industry, but it's very quiet. And unless like you're part of it, like you just otherwise wouldn't have heard of it unless maybe perhaps you're an experienced hiring recruiter started reaching out to you. But that's really, really cool. And then one more thing, when you applied for Microsoft, was it a cold apply? Was it like off their website or did a recruiter reach out to you as well? Was it through like a
It's actually
university?
kind of funny. So,
Uh-huh.
my senior year of college, uh, I had talked to my advisor the first semester, and she said,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, since you have C, you should take Java and all this." But I hadn't
Right.
done that yet. So I went to the Microsoft booth, and they wouldn't even take my resume. It was the second semester of my senior year, and then I had Java and stuff. Then they took my resume and they interviewed me and everything. So it's like it was a good thing that I didn't give up there. But yeah, it was really cold. I mean, it was just going to a job fair. And then
Mm-hmm.
ironically, I was on the other side of the table not too long after. I worked a ton of job fairs. I represented 6 different schools in the Midwest when I was recruiting for Microsoft. And it was cool that I had gone through the same process. I remember how nerve wracking it was trying to look for my first job. And, you're this college kid like wearing some uncomfortable suit or something, like not quite sure what you're doing, scared to like take the first step in the real world. And
Mm.
so I enjoyed being able to help people navigate that process and hopefully make it a little less scary.
I think one of the most underrated skill set people talk about in recruiting, and it's a huge, huge benefit advantage if you use it correctly, is just empathy. I think the fact that if you went through it right, then you're able to relate and
Hmm.
connect with other people. Wow. Okay. So Microsoft, you got in coding, then you pivoted essentially to recruiting. And then at that point, you're like, wow, recruiting is for me, which is really exciting. So what happened, I guess, after Microsoft? I know you kind of were able to show a little high level before, but just what happened afterwards?
Yeah, so I left and I got my MBA, and I thought maybe I would do business development or something. I actually did apply for a couple jobs,
Mm,
but then I started doing a little bit of contract recruiting, and then I
mm.
got a call from AppNexus, and that sounded really exciting to me, and so I decided to join there. And I have to say, I think that New York Tech in 2010 was a very exciting place to be. I feel like it was very Wild West, right? I mean, it was like the main developers in New York were in banks. And it was like a very stodgy operating environment. And startups were a very new thing. And I remember I would try calling people in San Francisco and stuff, and they'd be like, why would I want to live in New York? There's no software ecosystem there, like
Mm.
absolutely not. And so I think people thought that it was crazy to become a developer in New York. And I mean, like now, New York, is one of the leading places in America for startup funding. And what I always tell people about New York Tech, what I think is so exciting about it is that New York has so many industries that have been making money for a long time. There's finance and real estate and fashion and media.
Mhm.
And so there are so many startups that, they might not become the next Facebook, but they've figured out how to make one little aspect of real estate, save 2% of time, but that represents $1 billion a year or something, And
Mhm.
so I just feel like there's so much opportunity in New York with things like that, where a company can even bootstrap and become profitable in a not very long time. And I think that candidates are attracted to stable opportunities. I think to me, what's less stable is hey, we're this social network, but we have to sign up 100 million people in order to stay afloat, instead of like, hey, we just need like 5 big customers and that's going to help our SAS software pay for everybody here, so it's like, I think those things are very different. So I'm really glad that that's like where I really launched my career in New
Yeah,
York.
I think the greatest irony is that's what companies are battling the uncertain markets today, right? Without a solid business model or revenue incoming verticals, you are in a tough place. AppNexus, that's one of the OG companies in New York. I know that company very, very well. Did you apply cold as well, or were you reached out
No, they
to?
reached out to me.
They
Yeah.
reached out to you,
Yeah. Yeah.
fresh out
Josh
of,
Schwartz. Yep.
wow. Okay, so was that your first experience of a recruiter reaching out to you in your
No,
professional
no, I'd
career?
been reached out to before. Actually, I think that's how it happened with the contract recruiting job that I had as well. But I think that there just wasn't that many recruiters in New York then with like some experience with startups, and
Yeah.
so I feel like that was a good time to get my foot in the door.
Man, you must have come out with such as a hot shot, an amazing rare a jewel to find back in the day. And then when you joined, you were, I guess the title was just a technical recruiter.
Mhm.
What positions did you focus on
Oh,
when you joined?
everything under the sun. I mean,
Everything.
like, yeah, development, PM, design. I mean, and we had a lot of very technical roles at AppNexus. I mean, ad serving is like that super low latency C++
Mhm.
programming. So we were trying to pull people out of banks. But then it was a challenge, like, are they going to fit culturally? Are they going to be agile enough? So yeah, we hired a lot of those kind of people. And then like the infrastructure was really important as well. And so like a lot of DevOpsy kind of people or just like really deep systems kind of people.
So for positions that you at that point didn't have any experience recruiting for prior, what did you do to help you kind of learn the technologies or ramp up? Any tips that you can share for someone that's starting the recruiting career, especially technical recruiting, or someone who just got a job and they're like, oh my God, I'm responsible for X, Y, and Z. I don't know what these are. Like,
Yeah.
what were some things that you've done in the past? Obviously, one is leveraging your technical background, but aside from that, any tips?
Absolutely. I mean, like sure you can Google stuff and figure out, okay, is this like server side or like what stack is this on? Is this front end or back end? Like what do people build with this kind of thing? But
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I think, you find a candidate that you have good rapport with,
Mm-hmm.
ask them. I mean, people like talking about what they like doing. And so like you'd be surprised how far that goes, if you're just like, okay, cool. Now tell me about R. Like, what exactly is it? What does it mean to be statistical programming? Like, what is it similar to? Like, how do you know that you're proficient in it? Like, those kind of questions. I think, honestly, that's the best kind of thing is just jump into recruiting for that thing. And no matter how much you will always know less than you actually know, right? I mean, like the amount of stuff out there that you don't know will exceed what you do know. I was working for Thinks as a contract recruiter last year, and we got all sorts of jobs I had never even heard of before, like
Mm-hmm.
pattern makers with lingerie experience, people that had worked at like Victoria's Secret before, people who had experience putting things on shelves of retail stores like Target and knowing how to do product placement and promotion and stuff like that. I didn't even know these jobs existed, and now I have to find them. And so, I mean, just spending a lot of time with the hiring manager, like digging into what is this person doing day to day. I think that's kind of the biggest thing. Like, I think job descriptions can be kind of overrated because you're kind of thinking ahead to like, who do we think can do this job, when really at a more basic level we need to think about what is the job that needs to be done, because I think sometimes there can be some perhaps untrue assumptions into what you might need to have in order to do that job. Like at the end of the day, the hiring manager just wants somebody that can do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so occasionally as recruiters, I think we kind of have to pick our battles, but there are times that you might find somebody that doesn't fit the job description, but that you truly believe can do the job. And I think it's really important we present people like that.
And I think that can only happen if you have a really close relationship with the hiring manager, understanding exactly what he or she wants. But I love how
Absolutely.
you I love how you talked about candidates before that. It's funny, like you're speaking to someone on the other side of the phone who is a professional in whatever market that you're recruiting in. They're the best people to ask a ton of questions. So as long as you're open-minded, operate like a sponge, just absorb. It'll beat any YouTube video or books out there. So you joined AppNexus, and then I think even after that, you've worked at another tech company, as you mentioned. Previous Etsy. So I guess for both the positions, on average, how many positions were you responsible for working
Oh
at
my
these
gosh, I
companies?
had probably had like 30 or 40 open roles at a time. It was insane.
That sounds insane.
Oh, it was insane. And some of it was like crossover, like Etsy might have a need for front end people across 3 different teams. And so it's like, let's find the person and then let's figure where we're slotting them in. At Etsy, we were very lucky. We had a lot of applicants. Like I hardly ever had time for outbound because Etsy was really out there in the open source world. Etsy's pretty famous for Deployinator, which was like their like real-time deployment tool. And so that was great. That was a recruiter's dream, that I wake up, come in, and there's like 20 or 30 applicants there just waiting for me to look at. And so I think that is like a major thing that I would recommend to companies. Like, employer branding isn't just having some nice videos on your site, but like, truly doing things to establish yourself as a powerhouse in the development community. Really like getting out there. Like Etsy also like gave up some of its office space for some coding classes for like non-coders to transition in development positions, and especially focusing on women and diverse people and stuff. And so I highly recommend that companies do things like that, because that really, really helps the recruiters out.
Sounds again like they're at the forefront. You hear companies thinking about doing stuff like that now.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really cool that they did that. What was kind of like your overall day-to-day structure kind of look like as an in-house recruiter at a tech company back in the day?
Yeah, so we would have interviews usually starting in the morning, and so my morning was welcoming people and then making sure that they got to their first person, and then you kind of have to babysit what's going on with that all day long, because inevitably something may happen where like a candidate just gets left in the interview room and the next person wasn't alerted or something. So you're always just watching, is everything moving correctly there? So you've got that in your periphery. Then you're going through applications and figuring out who needs initial calls. Generally, as recruiters, we set those up with ourselves, and then moving other people along into next steps of the process. And then you probably have somebody at offer phase, and so you're meeting with the hiring manager, you're meeting with finance, you're trying to understand what the appropriate leveling is going to be, and so putting together an offer package, and then usually delivering that in a stairwell or something. Like, I don't know. Now I have the luxury of working at home. I don't know what it's been like for the past decade, but when I was in tech in New York, open offices were the hot thing. And let me tell you, as a person in HR, like that was tricky, right? Because you're like trying to talk to people about confidential information, like their future salary. Like you can't have people walking by. So it's like, we're always like literally hiding near like a pile of garbage bags or something, trying to roll out these offers.
That's so funny. And on the flip side, even my personal experience, how many candidates are talking in stairwells, right? Doing interviews. And I talk to candidates to this day, like, give me 1 second, Chris. Let me just get off my desk. And then you hear like doors open and close. Okay, I'm at a safe location. They're like looking around. So as stressful as it is for us recruiters or hiring managers to do that, on the candidates end, especially when they're working a full-time job and they have to stay in the building. Oh my God, it's like you have to be covert, be like a SWAT member trying to find some corner that's safe.
Oh, totally. Yeah, somebody goes and sits in their car or something. But it's funny, like there are so many unglamorous parts of our jobs that people don't think about.
But funny enough, like day to day, and especially if people are listening and there's a mix between agency recruiters, in-house, on the whole, what in-house recruiters do, not that different from what agency recruiters do. I am curious though, like from your experience, I'm sure both companies posted to like all the job boards out there using like a ZipRecruiter type probably software. How many of the inbound resumes that came in were actually relevant for the roles that you guys were recruiting for?
Yeah, I mean, you sort a lot of the wheat from the chaff.
Hmm.
I don't remember exact percentages, but unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people are good at self-evaluating whether their skill set matches up to the open job.
Hmm.
Maybe they're just really excited about the job. And I mean, I get that. I get that job hunting is really stressful and it is a numbers game. And so I mean, even when somebody's not a fit, I think it's really important that we treat them respectfully and inform them we're not moving forward and all that. But I think that it does kind of underscore why it's important to do outbound too. Like I actually think that was something kind of regrettable at Etsy. I mean, again, we were lucky enough that we had so many inbound applicants that I think we had a lot of great hires, but we probably missed out on some great potential hires because we never got to doing the more passive outreach.
It's good to have a little balance,
Yeah.
obviously, right? And so before AppNexus, you said that you were contract recruiting. Was that more agency or was that in-house
Yeah,
kind of
that was
experience?
just like 6 months of agency. So it's funny because like I don't really come from the agency world. I just did that for like 6 months between things, like when I first moved to New York.
Interesting. So you had a little bit of taste agency contracting, then you went straight into in-house, worked at two retrospectively like amazing companies. How are just high level the interview process for applying for a recruiter job in the tech world? Was it pretty straightforward? Were processes long out? Did they have some sort of like not really technical, but like some sort of challenging assessments that they asked you to do, or was it pretty just standard for you?
I think it was pretty standard. And I think what was nice is that all the interviews did end with some type of social aspect to the interview. Like,
Interesting.
Etsy was to go out to happy hour with my potential coworkers. ZocDoc like had me for breakfast when I interviewed there. And so I think recruiting is the kind of thing that culture fit really does matter because
Mhm.
you're a gatekeeper of the company's culture, right? And so they do really want to make sure that you jive with that. Actually, you can see there's my owl picture that's from Etsy. It was a gift
Mhm.
from a hiring manager because we're both insomniacs and we bonded over the fact we were sending each other 3 a.m. emails. But like Etsy was a place that very much vibed with who I am. I am a
Mm.
very like DIY kind of crafty person. Oh, there's like some macrame craft that I made myself, like all sorts of stuff like that. So I mean, it's just part of the interview is kind of like how Etsy are you? And luckily that's kind of me.
So it was kind of you mentioned ZocDoc. It was kind of a ZocDoc versus Etsy at that situation,
Oh
or
yeah,
were you talking?
when I was interviewing after AppNexus, those were the main two I was looking at.
Did you regret your decision now looking back?
I don't regret my decision. I
Mhm.
think ZocDoc is a phenomenal company. I think I would have had a great story there too. Honestly, though, they had a 24-hour window for making your decision.
Oh
And
wow.
so I had the breakfast with ZocDoc. Let's say it was like a Tuesday morning. I was supposed to have that happy hour with Etsy Wednesday night. And so I told ZocDoc I need to give Etsy the courtesy of doing this final interview. I felt like I had been responsible in setting up my interviews a day apart. I couldn't really get it much closer than that, but ZocDoc did stick to their 24-hour window. So I actually was walking into the interview with Etsy when I got the call from ZocDoc saying, thanks very much, we're pulling your offer. And so, fair enough to them. Like every company will decide what their policy is. I think their reasoning was that they felt like if you're going to join ZocDoc, you should know that in your bones. Like you should be so sure of it. You shouldn't need the extra time. I mean, personally, I try to talk companies out of that sort of thing. If I have a client company that wants to do that, my feeling is that a week is perfectly reasonable because I do think that somebody can line up their interviews so that, the offers are falling in that week span. But I don't think that a day is reasonable because you can't consider other offers. And I just think that it's, the market is very crazy today and there are a lot of great places to work. And so I think it is a little short-sighted to feel like you're the only great place that somebody could maybe work.
Every company in the tech space thinks that and believes that, right? But wow, 24 hours, that is actually quite aggressive. And I do the same thing too for companies that are super aggressive, specifically at like the offer stage. I'm like, guys, you just need to like look at the market. One little blip in candidate experience can be enough to tip the candidate a whole different direction.
Mhm.
And so sounded like Etsy was the right decision, and
I
it
think
seemed
so.
like you had a
And it
good
was a
experience.
fun time to be there. I have all sorts of crazy memories, including, driving a 200-pound cargo bike up the bridge, like trying to get the compost to the composting place because we were like a B Corp at that point. And so all the sustainable things that we would do, like recycling our food scraps, and that we were all a part of that. Like, I feel like we all felt a part of something bigger. And so it was a very, very magical time in my career for sure.
That's super cool. And I even hear from folks today, like Etsy's still a great place to work, really
I'm
strong
sure it is.
culture, really
Yeah.
difficult to poach people from Etsy. So if you're working at Etsy, that's awesome. Stay put. I'm sure it sounds like a lot of people are happy, which is really, really cool. And then for people who are just unfamiliar with tech, how you got paid at both AppNexus and Etsy, is it safe to assume it was kind of like a cash salary and some sort of equity on the back end?
Yep.
How was that for you without any experience? The first time, like equity, like did you value a lot of equity back in the day? Or like, you know what, like equity kind of sounds cool. Just want to make sure I get a competitive salary to support my lifestyle. Or did
I
you
think it's
just,
all a balance. I mean, I think that everybody has their different risk,
Mhm,
and so I mean, I think that most people have their minimum salary that they need to maintain their lifestyle and everything, but I don't think equity should be entirely discounted. I mean,
mhm,
like both companies, like the equity ended up being pretty worthwhile. And so it's of course something that you can't count on. It could be worth zero, it could be worth a lot.
mhm,
And so again, it comes down to risk, or you could take virtually, no risk and go work at one of the fangs, right? And then you have RSUs, and then those are more easily convertible into
mhm,
immediate cash. So, I mean, job offers, like, you're often comparing apples and oranges because you may have a bank that is all cash and that you get cash bonuses, maybe even multiple times a year. You have your FANG that has RSUs, and you have your startup that has equity. And so I think, again, you just really have to risk adjust because, like, you could potentially make the most with the startup, but you just don't know.
but at that time in your life, it seemed like you were very zoned in tech. Were you interested at all to work at the banks as a recruiter? Maybe after AppNexus or in between, or even after Etsy, or you were just, that's
No,
what you
I
wanted to
mean, my
do?
dream was to become an HR director, and I'm glad that I got to do that for a year.
Mhm,
But I wouldn't trade running my own staffing agency for anything. I do really enjoy it. I guess what I kind of miss about HR is just like that no 2 days are the same. I mean, it's the same for recruiting, right? But in HR, like, you're dealing with people, and so you deal with situations where people have a conflict with somebody else in the office or something. And I actually find those kind of conflicts interesting. Like, I love, again, it's maybe it comes down to the people watching and stuff, but like, how do we get a breakthrough here? So
mhm.
I very much enjoyed that too, but it's just funny where your career takes you.
It does. And I guess one more question I would love to ask you. So, from your experience, just in-house, hands-on IC recruiter, um, do you have what is like one advice or tip that you would like to share folks who are either currently working in-house right now, who are possibly looking into becoming one? What is there one thing, maybe two things that you can point to that you think would be very beneficial or helpful for those to find success in those types of jobs?
So your question is, like, what tips would I give an in-house recruiter to transition into the agency world?
What tip would you give to an in-house recruiter to be successful as an in-house recruiter?
Oh, to be successful as an in-house recruiter. Yeah. I think the number one thing is to understand your value proposition, right? Like, people see through BS. And so people want to work at a place that is a good place to work. So it's truly know why it's a good place to work. Why is it a good place to work for the designer? Why is it a good place to work for the front end engineer? Why is it a good place to work for the janitor? Like, you have to understand, okay, hey, we have this cool new initiative that's coming out in the design group. Like, we're moving to this whole new style, and like all these kind of things. Like, you actually need to keep up with everything that's going around
Mhm,
the company because you are the gatekeeper, you are the first person that person talks to, and so you have to think about what is going to motivate them. And money is really just a small part of it. Like, there is a range that you need to hit to make the person happy, but I have beat out offers that were higher many, many times in my career because one thing is people want meaningful work, And then the other is people want to feel valued. And so I really can't discount that enough in the interviewing process too. Like, go through your candidates every day and do an exercise where you're putting yourself in their shoes and you ask yourself, like, okay, if I'm Joe, do I feel like Etsy's been communicative enough right now? How am I feeling about Etsy if I'm Joe? Ooh, I know Joe's interviewing at ZocDoc too. Oh, I know they have their 24-hour thing, right? So like, are we keeping Joe moving along fast enough? Like, I haven't heard back from the hiring manager yet, but can I at least just send him a note saying, hey, I sent the hiring manager a ping, hope to have some news for tomorrow. So, I mean, and that's what I do as an agency recruiter with my clients too. Like, we have these client lists that I go through with my account managers, and like, really on a daily basis, you have to be thinking in their shoes, how are they feeling today? So yeah, those
Sure.
would be my top things: are be a great place to work, and then always be thinking about every single person there, because Joe doesn't care if you like closed out Maria today. Like, he is his own individual case, and you just really have to think about each person as an individual.
There's so many things we have to juggle conceptually as a recruiter every day. Like, do you personally use like notes yourself, Google Sheets? Like, how do you stay organized? Do you have like a favorite tool that you
I
use?
I love my ATS system. We use cats, and I always say it's like part of my brain. I
Mhm.
just adding every note in there and everything, I think, is just so important, because you cannot keep track of everybody. And even if you can keep track of everybody now, what about 2 years from now? When it's time to, okay, I know he took that new job 2 years ago, but maybe he's ready for something new. Check back in. I think that's really, really important. And add all those little notes. He's got a really cute dog named Baxter, who's this breed, and like, he's originally from Pennsylvania. Like, put all those notes in, because then it's the kind of thing, like, 2 years later you reach out and you're like, how's Baxter? Like, people appreciate that. Again, it's like treating each person as a person.
Absolutely. There's a chance they may or may not remember you in 2 to 3 years. But I think the fact that you're making an effort to remember those fine details will obviously help you just cut through the noise of perhaps other people that are reaching out to them as well. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So really quick, fast forward, it seemed like you had an awesome job, or I guess career thus far, working at really great, reputable companies in New York. You then became director of talent HR, Aha Life. But then even fast forward after that, you made the decision to bet on yourself, to start your own agency. And this is, I guess, from someone that up until then, most of your professional, is it safe to say most of your professional experience has been in the in-house world? Is that correct?
That's correct.
So at what point did you decide? What was the catalyst for you to decide to work for yourself, and why agency instead of maybe like an in-house recruiting consultant, or somehow doing more of like a B2B where you can optimize recruiting teams at software companies, which at that point was your main skill set?
Yeah. Well, it all happened by accident. So after I
Oh.
was laid off from Aha Life, I thought I would just freelance for a little bit.
Mhm.
I did have other offers to be an in-house HR director again, and I just felt like I needed a little bit of time and space to kind of unburn out. And I
Mhm.
thought contingency was the way to do it. But then I needed some help and a little more help, and my team started to grow. And I learned a lot of things by trial and error in the beginning. Like, at first, I just was like, okay, how do I be an agency? And I don't want to knock other agencies, because I think there's a lot of phenomenal agencies, especially in New York. But like, one feeling that I started having is that I felt like the agency world was too transactional, that it's very much like you make a placement and then you're on to the next thing. And I just like don't even really like the word placement, because to me it's very much like a set it and forget it kind of thing. Like, this is a person that you have just hired, that you hope is going to stay with your company for a few years at least, that maybe one day is going to become a hiring manager. And I'm used to, like, in the in-house world, that person is probably sitting in the same room with me, right? I am very accountable for this person. Let's hope that the rest of the coworkers like him and he's pulling his own weight and everything, because I brought him here, right? And so, yeah, I think that it really, there was some of that was the shift. And then I think the other thing was just embracing who I am as a recruiter. And again, I'm like an in-house recruiter. I think about long-term hires. And I really think about that deep people watching of getting to know the candidate and getting to know the client. And so we just really focused on that. Like that's our secret sauce, that it, especially smaller companies that don't have their own recruiting, or that, maybe need to augment the recruiting team. It's not big enough, or there's some really specialized roles. Like we are working hand in hand with those recruiters or those hiring managers to find them that good long-term hire.
You said you were burned out from, I guess, Aha Life. And then you wanted some space, and then you went to the agency world. And I kind of chuckled when I heard that because it's usually the other way around. People get burned off from the agency world, they go in-house.
Oh.
Can I ask you, without going too much into it, but like, what about that really burned you out? Were you just doing too many things?
Well,
Were you?
laying people off is not fun. I love HR, like I said,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I think you would have to just have a totally different personality than I have. I don't know to be able to do that. You're taking away someone's livelihood, and I understand that layoffs need to happen sometimes and everything, but to be the one to actually be handing the tissue box to somebody who's saying, I just signed my new lease, I don't know what I'm going to do, that sucks. That's hard.
Mm-hmm.
That weighed on me. And so to have to do that to these people that I had been working in the office with closely for months, I mean, that it really took a toll. And so that was why I kind of just felt like I don't feel ready to just roll into being a new HR director again. I think maybe it's like, when you lose your dog, like how maybe you can't get a new dog right away. It kind of felt like the same thing. Like, I don't know if I'm ready to have like, my whole group of new people like under my wing as an HR director. I think maybe I need some time. And I did truly think I would go back to HR. But yeah, this just ended up working out.
Yeah, and I think that's what I respect about you, because I think there will be other people in similar situations where they had to do a mass layoff, and then they wake up the next morning, life's the same, and they move on, right? I think what I've learned from you so far in this conversation is that you really honestly do genuinely care about people. Empathy plays a huge role in your career, and that clearly translates into you running your own agency. And I completely agree that I think one of the reasons people or just founders of companies have bad experiences with agencies is it's very short term. We're very like short. A lot of agencies today are just very short term focused, and from there, I think the wrong metrics are created, and from there, the wrong behaviors and attitudes are created. A lot of the reasons why some founders out there never want to work with agencies, as again, unfortunately. But I think the fact that you have an HR background, you have exposure to that, you combine that with your ability and openness and just genuine care and empathy for people, I think really gives you kind of that extra holistic service that a lot of agencies don't, that who honestly only care about placements, and then, like you said perfectly, just move on to the next one. So I think that's really, really cool, because it's very easy to come to agency world, get focused on placements, and then that's it. You don't care about the candidate anymore. You don't touch base with them anymore. Even do like the basic follow-ups. And I think you do that, but then you do a lot more because you genuinely care. And I think a lot of that comes from who you are as a person, but also your unique experience throughout your career so far, just working in different capacities and different types of roles with different types of teams.
Well, thank you, Preston. Absolutely.
So
I mean, that's the whole reason I was drawn to this, is I like people.
Telling you, how can you be a recruiter and not like people, right?
Right.
So you ended up working for yourself at a business model that you didn't have experience with. So like with me, I learned recruiting at a nationwide agency. Like I learned the systems, and for better or for worse, I learned all of that. And you didn't, a lot of your experience was in-house. So how difficult was it for you to ramp up? How difficult was it for you to even just learn the basics of even starting your own business, from even basic things like taxes, incorporating? I'm sure there's hundreds of things that go through our mind as a recruiter running a full desk, but then adding now the responsibilities of running a successful, profitable business, and then eventually making that leap and evolving to hiring people. I mean, can you talk me through the different phases of like maybe your sanity and stress levels, and how you were able to successfully make that jump from one plateau to the next?
Well, so I had run a business before. I had owned 2 coffee shops in Seattle. So I knew about QuickBooks and taxes and all of that. So that wasn't the new part. I think the new thing was like really trying to help people be metrics based with the right metrics, that was kind of
Mhm.
a challenge because I mean, a lot of agencies use metrics, but I think that sometimes it can become a double-edged sword. Like if people think that you care about how many candidates they spoke to that day or something, then it starts becoming a quantity thing and not a quality thing. And so just kind of figuring out how to measure the right things and how to get people to do those right things, I think was really one of the challenges. And then of course, like I have those hire and fire decisions that I have to make myself. Like it doesn't get easier just because I have my own business doesn't mean I'm not doing layoffs now. I mean, I do have to let people go sometimes if they're not performing and stuff. And I mean, my philosophy on that is the same as it was when I was an HR director. And that my biggest hope is that it was not a surprise. That, if I do need to let somebody go, that when I pull them into my office and I ask them, why do you think we're meeting today? That they know exactly what the meeting is about. So I do really try to give people actionable feedback in the true hope that they'll turn their performance around and that I won't have to let them go. But that's honestly one of the hardest things I think about running the business. The other thing is, like, as an in-house recruiter, I never had to do business development. So that is something that does not naturally come to me. Like, how do you reach out to people and ask them if they need recruiting help? And so it's something that I'm getting better at little by little, but that does not come to me naturally. I am not naturally a salesperson at all.
So would you say if you were to look at agency recruiting or a full desk recruiting from a high level, you got the biz dev client side, then you got the candidate side, you feel a lot more comfortable on the latter. Is that correct? Interfacing with people, developing strong relationships, cultivating them.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how you got your first clients? Was it through, I mean, I'm assuming at this time, like working at great companies, you probably built a really great network.
That's exactly it. It was like that people who had been directors of engineering and stuff at Etsy and AppNexus now were like CTOs or VPs of engineering somewhere else, and I could reach out to them and see if they needed some hiring help. So yeah, that was how I got the first few contracts.
I'm telling you, and I think if you're listening and you're thinking about working for yourself, whether in recruiting or not, I mean that this is the way to do it. Like have a good number of experience in whatever profession that you're in, develop really strong relationships and really strong good relationships, because in the event, right, like you do end up saying, hey, I want to work for myself, they're the first, that's the easiest way to get business.
Absolutely.
100%. So everything happens for
Yep.
a reason. um,
Absolutely. I mean, so like two things that I would say. For one,
mhm.
growth is not linear. I mean, things grew linearly for a number of years. And then you probably saw too, but like 2020 was a down year. That was like our one down year. And then 2021, it like tripled 2020's business. It was insane. And we've never had a year do that. But it seemed like we reached some critical mass of happy customers that were giving referrals to other people and stuff. We had also gotten in good with some VCs that were giving us referrals to their portfolio companies. But it was just kind of weird because it's like they say, oh, like an overnight success, X years in the making. It kind of felt like that type of thing. So,
No,
yeah.
I think hard work and consistency compounds. And then at a certain point, it will inevitably snowball, right? And I loved how you just said it so perfectly. Like I completely agree. I think if all you do is focused on just transaction, you don't care about the person you placed, let alone even your own client, the founder, hiring manager, you never talk to them again, you're leaving immense amount of opportunity on the table for them to happily refer you to other people in their network if you chose to maintain and cultivate that relationship really, really well, even after all the good work is done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's awesome. I think for me, who had a little bit more of like a sales business background, uh, I wouldn't say it came naturally. I think doing business and lead gen is still always going to have a level of discomfort to a lot of people because you're just reaching out to people you don't know. And so it just honestly takes like trial by fire and just evolving and learning from mistakes and getting a lot of feedback to be better. But for someone that did not have a sales or agency background like yourself, it's really, really, really cool that you probably by now have come to a place where you feel a lot more confident doing that, but then you were able to kickstart your business in a very, very smart way, leveraging your own network. What was it like to make do you remember the first hire for your agency? Was this person responsible for just sourcing candidates, clients, a bit of both? Like
Yeah, he was 360.
how did you find this person?
Through my network. He was somebody that
Again,
when I
through
had been
network.
in-house, he had been a vendor to us. And so I knew him that way.
And then this person, sorry, you said that was this person that, did he or she have a recruiting background before you hired them? They did.
Yeah.
Okay. So what were your thoughts in, or I guess, what are your thoughts now hiring more experienced recruiters than hiring someone inexperienced and you just teach them from the ground up? Do you have any preference one way or another?
Yeah, most of our hires are experienced recruiters. I mean, of course, like you may need to break some habits, like everybody does the candidate intake call a little differently and stuff. And there's certain info that we want to get. We've talked about hiring maybe some recent college grads and stuff. I don't think it's a bad strategy, but it does require having the time to really properly train them. And that's been a constraint.
Gotcha. Do you think that having success as an in-house recruiter can easily translate to success as an agency recruiter?
I don't know that I'd use the word easily, but I think that it can. Like, again, I think that you can leverage your strengths as an in-house recruiter in the agency world. Like, again, I think like really the personalization of each, each placement. Like, I think that really can serve an in-house recruiter well going into agency, but I think that then you have to have like a lot more view on your metrics and stuff like that even more so than being in-house. And so I think really understanding those things, also in-house, like you have applicants, you don't really have those so much as an agency recruiter, things like that, like knowing that you eat what you kill and you have to hustle and stuff, like it's a different pace.
What does your day-to-day look like now? Are you hands-on with recruiting at all, or is it very strictly just management and just leadership now for you?
I do interact with candidates some. Like I really enjoy trying to match people to roles. I still think that is really fascinating, understanding somebody's background and what they want to do. And then we have not only our roles, but like hundreds of partner roles in our system. So it's a fine art trying to get people hooked up with the right roles. I enjoy doing that. A lot of my day is consumed with managing our account managers. So I go to the meetings that they have with their pod. They have a recruiter and sourcers working on their recs, so that I have a good sense of what is happening in each pod. And that if I hear like, oh, this client isn't getting back to me or that kind of thing, I know where I need to jump in. But also like coaching them on writing difficult emails to clients, and then coaching recruiters some on stuff with candidates if they have any particularly challenging candidate situations, helping them close offers, that type of thing. But I really try like not to do it hands-on myself, but it's a learning opportunity for that person. And so really trying to walk them through it and prepare them so that they can do it well themselves.
Right. You don't want to take away that experience from them.
Exactly.
How big is your team right now?
40.
Wow. I think last we spoke, I mean, it was probably closer to 20 or under 20.
Probably.
So what's the future for you? Like, are you on a mission to scale this further to 50, 60, 100, or are you in a sweet?
Why not? Yeah, no, we do really want to scale. I think we're all kind of holding our breath now this year though, right? Like, I mean, ever since 2020, it's been very weird, right? And so we don't know, like this doesn't seem like a 2020 kind of economic setback. It's something different. It's like we're even seeing some of the bigger tech companies slow their hiring, but then some smaller tech companies are actually accelerating their hiring because now it's becoming a slightly better environment for it. And so I don't know. It seems like maybe hiring's down by 20% or something, if I had to just kind of anecdotally guess from what I'm seeing in my neck of the world. But I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. So I think right now the main goal is just like to try to stay afloat in whatever's going on.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought that up, Tatiana. I mean, 2020 was a surprising year to say the least. None of us obviously saw it coming. And then just as we rebounded from that and we saw just a record bull kind of 2021 year, now we have to kind of navigate this 2022, 2023. Like you, I'm just staying as cautious and aware as much as possible. And you said it well, a lot of big tech companies, typically what they're doing has a very, I guess, predictable trickle-down effect to the rest of the technology industry. So a lot of people saw that the big techs, the FANGs, have slowed or even downright stopped hiring. So from that, a lot of startups or smaller companies tend to start getting a little bit more concerned or just followed suit as default, as a lot of them do. But At the same time, I do know that a lot of the biggest, most reputable companies that we know today in the tech space, like Microsoft and Netflix, Airbnb, et cetera, there's a ton of them have all been started and funded and scaled significantly in down markets. So there will always
AppNexus
be
too. Yep.
AppNexus too.
Yep.
Great plug back to AppNexus. So yeah, I mean, having said that, I think that there will always be demand, especially in the tech recruiting space. There will be, of course, a little bit less demand, but even just the macro unemployment numbers aren't dropping off significantly or changing significantly here in the country. So it's honestly like a week by week, month by month. Is there anything you're doing any different to kind of help you guys navigate everything, or is it just
Yeah,
kind of
I mean,
like?
honestly, to be honest, I'm not hiring right now, just
Mhm.
because I don't know like if things are going to constrict at all, right?
Yeah,
And
save,
so
save, save.
yeah, and so like we're trying to, we have some AMs that are kind of running double duty, like doing some recruiting calls and stuff, because I just don't want to hire another recruiter right now because what if things slow down a bit? I don't want them to be twiddling their thumbs. And so I think that's the main thing that I'm doing a little bit differently this year than last year. I mean, last year we were hiring like crazy.
Mhm. That's exciting. So um, I think it'd be interesting to see what you do maybe 3, 5 months down the line. Hopefully things are on the up and up. But I guess I want to ask you, I know our time's almost up here, for someone that in my eyes really had an amazing career. And I wish I would have more time. I'd love to pick your brain on your coffee companies. I mean, that's awesome.
Thank
Um,
you.
are you happy? Are you happy with how your career ended up and being in the talent acquisition recruiting space for someone who went to school in astrophysics and math?
I am happy. Like, life is not a straight line. Like, I don't think that life would be as fun if I would have known when I was 20 that this is where my life was going, right?
Mhm.
And so again, I feel rewarded because we help people find jobs. I get to work with some of the coolest tech companies in New York. I have like a really good view of what is happening across tech. I have a team that I really like, and I have a lot of flexibility in my life. Like, I'm very close with my grandma. She just turned 97. She's one of my best friends on the planet. And every Wednesday we go to lunch, and she loves going to Olive Garden and Panda Express, and she loves getting manicures afterwards, and I can take 2 or 3 hours in the middle of the day on my Wednesday to go hang out with grandma. And I appreciate that. Like, that is worth all the money in the world to me. So yeah, I'm very happy with my life right now.
And I
Thank
think
you.
that's only possible because you built an awesome business, a very successful one with a great team that can hold onto the fort when you spend time with family. Real quick though, what markets are you specialized in? And then do you do primarily contingent? I know that you do a lot of different services to companies, retained, exclusive.
Absolutely. So, as I said, most of our companies have been in New York just because that's where my network is. But what we do translates to just about anywhere. We work with companies that are as small as 2 people looking for their third, like a
Mhm.
co-founder, all the way up to companies that call themselves startups, but they're like eyeing their IPO and they might already be over 1,000 employees. So I mean, the definition of a startup varies greatly. I
Mhm.
mean, and they are in all different industries. As I mentioned, like we worked with Thinx, the period underwear company. We've also worked with more traditional like hedge funds and fintech and ad tech, and so really across industries. But I would say half of our roles are pure tech, front end, back end, DevOps. A quarter of our roles are product and product design, and then a quarter of our roles are everything else. And that's usually HR, finance, sales, but then, some of the one off roles too, which we also have fun with.
And most of these are full-time placements?
They're all full time. Yep. We actually prefer to work hourly wherever possible,
Mm.
just because we feel like that does align us more with what I was saying about us being more of an extension of an in house team, or maybe we're even serving as their in house team. I feel like there's so much besides presenting profiles that needs to happen in a good recruiting process. Like, we
Mhm.
need to make sure that the candidate has great experience, and so that the interviewers are properly trained and they know what to ask and what not to ask and how to evaluate that, and how is the decision being made. Is it the hiring manager's decision, or is it decision by committee, or are there certain things that would give somebody veto power? Like, there's so many little things that need to get worked out, and that I don't ever want our team to feel like, no, we're just focusing on sending the people in and making that placement. So We do work on contingent basis too, but again, hourly is just the preference.
Yeah, just another example of you changing things up a little bit to provide more value than what your average recruiter agency is doing. But Tatiana, thank you so much. It's been a fun, dynamic conversation for the past hour. I've learned actually a lot of things from this myself. And for those who are listening, Tatiana and I actually go way back, and I think we've helped each other a little bit throughout the years. And it's always great for me to learn and see and just give praise to people who are just finding tremendous success here in the recruiting and talent acquisition space. So I want to thank you again. I think you've done an incredible job and really just pivoting and embracing your life and all the different turns and that it presented itself, and how you navigated everything from being in-house recruiting. Well, first of all, the math and astrophysics, to in-house recruiting, to HR, and now running your own agency with a little bit of entrepreneurial coffee ventures on the side. But for those that are looking for new roles, specifically in tech, for companies that are hiring, please obviously reach out to Tatiana and her team. She's clearly doing a lot more than just transactions that many agencies are doing. And so if people wanted to find you, like, where's the best place to find you?
So my company is called Niah. That stands for Needle in a Haystack. So NIAH recruiting.com.
I had no idea that's what it stood for. I thought Niah was like a original word, maybe that had some sort of significance to you in your life. Very cool. Well, you've heard it from her. And Tatiana, again, thank you so much. I hope you had a good time as well. And hoping to maybe reconnect with you soon in the next couple of months. And fingers crossed as we hold our breath coming into 2023. But let's hope this Q4 can at least be somewhat positive for us all.
Yeah, fingers crossed for you too, Preston. Thank you for having me.
You got it. And hope to link up soon, sometime in the West Coast.
Thanks
again.